This final talk's on other useful bits of information that were miscellaneous, it didn't really fit into any of our other talks, and basically we'll be pointing you in the direction of lots of useful contacts and literature and resources. So hopefully it's helpful. Intellectual property is one element of the application that we've found through experience can cause individuals a lot of problems, and it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding. And personally, from my experience of dealing with intellectual property issues during my PhD, it's not straightforward, and I can understand why it often causes issues. The important thing to say though is all research generates intellectual property, so speak to your institute's IP department for advice. Don't rely on some vague generic statements about the IP of your research. That's not going to cut it with the NIHR. Aim to be as specific as possible, and if you speak to your local research and development offices, within your institute, they will point you in the direction of the experts. So there's Nottingham's and Leicester's IP points of contact, but all your institutes should have intellectual property experts, and get in contact with them and they'll help you through that difficult aspect of the form. There's a section of the form that asks you to detail ethical and regulatory issues that you'll have in carrying out this research, and then also how you'll overcome them. So for example, will you need regulatory approval? Are you using data that already exists, either patient or service user or care information from an existing database, and if so, have they given their approval for their data to be used, or do you have an exemption under section 251? That's just one example that I know, but there's all different issues that you'll have to think through, and a really good resource for that is the Healthcare Research Authority, because they've pulled all this information together, and they even have a decision tool that can help you decide, there's the link to it at the bottom, whether you will need regulatory approval or not. And if it isn't clear for your specific case after using that risk tool, then they welcome you to contact them. So that's really useful. So the costs are quite deceptive in that in stage one you just need to put down two figures. You just need to put down a cost for the research costs, and then a cost for the NHS support and treatment costs or external intervention costs. So that makes it seem like a small task when you're looking at the whole form. You think, oh, I've just got two little numbers to fill out there, but be aware, at stage two you have to give justification to those costs, and if the costs increase by a lot, the NHR doesn't look favourably upon that if the costs increase by a lot from stage one to stage two, and you've got to give a really justified, detailed reason about why this is enough money to support it, but why it's the right amount of money as well, and why everything's needed. And to do that, you fill out a SOCAT form, which stands for Schedule of Events Cost Attribution Tool for Health Research. And in the first instance, you'll work on that with your research team or your research sponsor or lead NHS provider. That might be your Research and Development Office or your CTU. So you can see there's quite a few people that might be involved, but contact a local finance officer, and if it isn't their job, they will quite happily point you to someone else. But whatever cost you come up with using the SOCAT, that has to be verified by the local CRN, by an accord specialist at the local CRN. So you need to give them some time to do that as well, and come back and maybe dispute in a bit of a conversation there. So there's the contact for the finding your local CRN. There's an office in Leicester and there's an office in Nottingham. Not that really matters nowadays because everything's online, but just so you know who to contact whichever one you're nearest to. So they'll need to be involved, and then, as I've said, you'll need someone from an institute or from an institutional point of view, but which part of your institute that isn't always exactly clear. So speak to someone in your department that you think will know, or speak to ourselves if you are really struggling, and we'll hopefully point you in the right way. There's just at the bottom is a link for early contact and engagement, and that talks about the accord as well, which is all to do with the costings. So I can't stress enough, don't overlook that part. It's a big task. If you're planning to do a randomised control trial as part of your fellowship application, whether that be a full trial, a feasibility or a pilot study, then the NIHR encourages you to think about whether you need involvement from a clinical trials unit. So the top link there is a link to all the UK CRC registered trials units in the UK. So they're trials units that have been accredited, that what they're doing is the right way to run trials by independent assessors. And then there's 3 links to 3 clinical trials units that have been used by applicants that we've helped in the past. So that's Derby Clinical Trials Support Unit, Leicester Clinical Trials Unit, and Nottingham Clinical Trials Unit. And then it also asks you whether you need to consider support from the local CRN, but as we've talked about in the past slide, everybody needs to be thinking about the local CRN because they need to sign off your costs, so they're really useful to contact early. This slide's a real mishmash of different information, but they're all useful, so I thought I'd just get them down and you've got them there. So first of all, NIHR says if you read the guidance really well and you're still not sure, then give us an email with your query or question and we'll do our best to answer it for you. Then hopefully you remember involved from the patient and public involvement talk, and it's a really good resource if you go on their website. If you're struggling with how to do PPI, or even if you're not struggling and you think you're doing it well, please go and check, and they've got some really good resources on there. After that, there's the international guidance for the harmonisation of technical requirements for pharmaceuticals for human use. That probably should have gone on the clinical trials slide, but that's quite useful to look at. Then I just want to highlight, because NIHR have highlighted it, the biobank has 500,000 people that were aged between 40 and 69 when they enrolled between 2006 and 2010. It's followed them up and it's taken blood and urine and saliva samples along with lots of other information about them, and it's stored them on a database which you can make applications to use that data. So if you're thinking about getting that kind of data and collecting it yourself, it might be better to think about, does that database have more data and a bigger data set for what I need, and actually it's already collected, because that could really help move your study quicker. Then we got the Cochrane library. If you're thinking about doing a systematic review, check there isn't already the systematic review that you're interested in there, but then also Cochrane's the best way to do systematic reviews, to set it up so that it's framed as using the Cochrane framework. And then finally, if you are going to use an NHS research and development office, then that's where you'll be able to find the contact details for them. So the final contact that I think are really useful is ourselves, the East Midlands Research Design Service. So obviously you already all know us a little bit from these sessions, but there's our email address in case you don't have it. And if you go on our website, you can submit a formal request for support with your application if you haven't already done so. I'd really encourage you to do that. You get assigned a advisor, and they will draw on the experience of the whole team if needs be to bring in the advice that you need for the queries that you've got for your application. So we can do things like bringing in PPI support, we can review the application as a whole. We can look at the training and development plans. We can look at the person section. We can look at the place section. We can organise mock interviews. We can look at feedback from previous failed applications if you've unfortunately had a previous application that wasn't successful. So we'd really love to support you if you'd like to submit an application. And also our Twitter handle is there. Do follow us. Louise puts out some really useful information on that we give in these talks previously, or that we've seen other RDSs giving their talks or other organisations talk about. So that's a really useful one to be following on Twitter if you're on Twitter. And then finally, just to encourage you a little bit more, these are some nice things that people said about us, and in a review by the NIHR, it was found that having RDS support improved your chances of success for an application. So what more do you need to know? Thanks for listening to this and all the previous seminars. We'll now move into the breakout rooms. Thank you.